gals and non-binary pals, GM Potter here. Welcome to my channel where I discuss books and bookish things. If you're watching this on the day it comes out, it is the day after Christmas, and I thought what better time than this space between Christmas and New Year's to discuss a story that starts between Christmas and New Year's, and that is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This is the translation by W.S. Merwin. Let's get into it. Okay, so this book, I've had this specific copy, for years. It was a birthday gift when I turned 14 from my mom and dad, and I read it and I absolutely fell in love. It's an epic poem of the story of my favorite of the Knights of the Round Table, which is Sir Gawain. He's Arthur's little cousin, and let's get into it. So the original author of the poem is unknown. This is a take on it by W.S. Merwin. There are other translations out there of the same thing from the same story. Tolkien did one. E.V. Gordon did one. Norman Davies did one. There's a lot of adaptations of this one. There was even a movie called The Green Knight with Dev Patel that I really want to see, but I'm on a no-buy right now, so I'm not going to pay to rent it or buy it off of the Zon, if you will. So I haven't seen that, so we're just going to be discussing the book itself, the story itself. It's medieval poetry, and I'll just turn to a random section in the middle. This book has the original Old English on the left and the translation on the right. So you can read it, you can see what the original text said, and you can see what the new translation is. And you can see, the thing with Middle English is it almost makes sense when you try to read it aloud. Like, it sounds, it reminds me of German in that you're listening to it and you're like, I should be understanding more of this. I should be getting more of this. I should be grasping more of this. And this one is, I would describe the book, the story as a whole, as just the translation, as descriptive and moving, and it doesn't dwell. It's very let's get into the action. That being said, I've heard it told that this story has the biggest twist in medieval literature, and an absolutely heartbreaking ending. So, it's a story in four parts. It's Christmas time at Camelot, and where the story takes place on New Year's Day. And Gawain, King Arthur's nephew, is dining with Arthur and Guinevere and the Knights of the Round Table, and they're having a grand old time, when all of a sudden this big giant of a man bursts in, and he's all dressed in green and resplendent robes and just absolutely gaudy, and he's got giant weapons that are like huge and terrifying, and his horse is green. Like, everything about him from head to toe is green, and he challenges them to a blow for blow, that you hit me as hard as you can, and then in a year, I'll hit you. And if you win, if you survive my blow, you get this beautiful axe. And everyone's like, I don't really want him to hit me with the weapon. No. And he's like, what is this? I thought this was King Arthur's court. I thought this was the Knights of the Round Table. Aren't you guys supposed to be brave and honorable and all of this? And Gawain's like, all right, bet. I got you. And he goes up to him and he's like, hey, can I have the terms? And he's like, I'll tell you the terms after. And he's like, okay. And so he lops off the Green Knight's head, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, he did it in one stroke. He did it. And the Green Knight picks up his head and he's like, all right, in a year's time, I need you to come find me on New Year's Day. Otherwise, you're a coward, and I'll attack you with my sword. Or with my axe. And then he leaves. He tells him that he's the Knight of the Green Chapel, and he leaves. And part 2, it kind of glosses over the year that the year that happens, because it's not relevant to the story. And on All Souls Day, Gawain wakes up and he's like, I really need to go do this, because my integrity, my everything is on the line. If I don't, everyone will know that I'm a coward, that I'm a weakling, that I'm not good enough to be one of Arthur's knights. And so he sets out and he goes, and he's going all over Wales, and he can't find the Green Chapel, and he's sleeping on the ground in his armor, and he's freezing, and he's cold, and he's miserable, and he's like, why did I ever even agree to this? I'm never going to find it. I'm going to be a coward. I'm going to be branded as a coward for the rest of my days, and nothing's ever going to come of this. When he finally finds a castle, and the lord of the castle, he's like, hey, can I sleep here instead of sleeping outside? And they're like, yeah, sure. And the lord's like, oh, it's wonderful to meet you. Stay with us for a few days. It's almost Christmas time. And he stays with him, and he's like, look, I can't stay any longer. I've got to find the Green Chapel. I don't know where it is. I have to. I'm on a quest. And the lord of the castle says, oh, I know where it is. It's not that far away. Stay with us until New Year's Day, and then New Year's Day in the morning, you can. It's not even half a day's journey from here. Just go out in the morning on New Year's Day. It's like, oh, okay. And the lord of the castle says that in exchange for lodging, that they will share and share alike. That anything that the lord of the castle gets while he's out hunting, he will share with Gawain, and any spoils that Gawain gets while he's staying there, he will share with the lord. And that will be his repayment. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. And that's the end of part 2. So at this point, we're getting into spoiler territory, because we're getting into part 3, and there's only 4 parts. So if you don't want the story spoiled for you, it's originally from like the 500s, I think. Like, it's a very old story. If you don't want spoilers, I'll put a timestamp so you can safely skip ahead, because we're getting into the second half of the book, and I feel like that's where spoilers really begin. So I'll put a timestamp, but it is a 1,500-year-old story, as it were. So part 3, the lord of the castle goes out, and he brings back, I think it's a deer, and shares it with Gawain. And Gawain, there's this beautiful lady in the castle, and she's coming on to Gawain, and she kisses him, and he's like, all right, I'll kiss the lord of the castle, and we'll be square. It's like, oh, okay, cool. And then the lord of the manor brings back a boar, and Gawain gets kisses, and so he kisses the lord the number of kisses he's been kissed. That's that. And the lord of the castle says, the story goes, the lord said, by Saint Giles, you are the best I know, and you will be rich in a while if all your dealings turn out so. Meaning that as long as he stays true and honorable and noble, he's going to be greatly rewarded. And it's like, is that a blessing on Gawain, or is that a warning? And so the third time, the lord, all he can get is a fox. He's had a horrible day hunting. All he gets is a fox pelt, which he gives to Gawain. And the woman comes on to Gawain, and she's like, make love to me. And he's like, no, I'm a knight. I can't. I'm honorable. We're not married. I can't do this. And so she kisses him, and she gives him a belt that, okay, and the story goes, do you refuse this silk now? The lady said then, because it seems such a slight thing in itself. It is true, it is little, and it does not look like much, but anyone who knew the powers bound up in it, perhaps would hold it in higher esteem. For if a man has this green belt fastened around him, as long as the knot is knotted about, as long as it is knotted about his waist, there is no knight under heaven who can cut him down. There is no cunning on the earth that can kill him. And she gives this to him. And Gawain, like, the lord comes back, and he gives the fox pelt to Gawain, and he's like, did you get anything today? And Gawain's like, yeah, I got a kiss. Here you go. He kisses him like 3 times. And the Lord is like, "Are you sure?" And Gawain's like, "Yep, that's all I got." And that's the end of part 3. So Gawain is untrue. So part 4 is New Year's Day, and Gawain goes out to meet the Green Knight, and the first strike, Gawain flinches, and he's like, "You can't flinch," and the second strike, he cuts him a little bit, and the blood flows, and then we get to, it's page 159. The other knight turned away from him and rested on his axe, the Green Knight, set the shaft toward the ground and leaned on the head, and looked at the prince standing there on the field, the prince being Gawain. How brave, how fearless, how boldly he stood there, armed and daring anything, and in his heart he liked him. Then he spoke pleasantly in his full voice, the sound of it ringing out as he said to the knight, "Bold man, do not be so angry on this field. No one here has misused you or been unmannerly with you, beyond the agreement you made at the king's court. If I owed you a stroke, you have it. Consider yourself well paid. I release you of any other debts. If I meant to have dealt a blow far more deadly than that, and done you more harm. First, I made the motion of striking, but it was not serious, and I left your skin untouched, which was only right, according to the agreement we made the first night, which you observed faithfully, keeping your word with me, giving me all your gains as a man should. The second time I made the motion, man, was for the morning you kissed my fair wife. You returned the kisses, and for those I offered you only two harmless gestures. The true men truly pay, and they have nothing to fear. You failed at number 3, which you got cut for. For that braided belt you are wearing belongs to me. My own wife gave it to you. I know the story about your kisses and everything that you did, and the wooing of my wife. I planned the whole thing. I sent her to test you, and I'm convinced now that you must be the most perfect knight to ever walk the earth. As a pearl is more precious than the white peas around it, so in good faith is Gawain among other fine knights. But here you lacked a little, sir, and failed to keep faith, though not from treachery, nor my wife's wooing either, but for the love of your life, and I blame you less for that. And it's just, the lord of the castle was the Green Knight the whole time. That's the big twist, and it's like, The ending is something that just speaks to me and moves me. Now Gawain rides in the wild ways of the world on Gringolet, when his life had been granted him by grace. Often he put up in houses, and often in the open, had many adventures on the way, overcame many, which I do not intend to tell you about at this time. The wound he had on his neck was all healed, and he wore the shining belt around him, slanting down to the side like a baldric, with the thong knotted under his left arm, in token of his fault and the stain of it. And so he comes to the court whole and unharmed. Joy woke in that household when the king heard that good Gawain had come. They were happy to hear it. The king kisses the knight and the queen too, and many other knights are eager to welcome him, ask him how he had fared, and he told them the strange story, admitting all the hardships he had endured, and what happened at the chapel, how the knight acted there, the love of the lady and the belt last. He showed the scar on his neck, and he had from the knight's hand mark of blame for his bad faith. He suffered at having to tell it. Grief and remorse made him groan, and the blood made his face hot, and the shame making it known. So that Gawain was noble and was fair and was kind all throughout the story, until he gets basically to the day before he's supposed to meet the Green Knight. And in that he falters, and he's called out on it. And he spends the rest of his days trying to make up for it, knowing he never can, because he doubted, because he faltered in his faith and in his honor. And it's just something that's always stuck with me, that Gawain's my favorite of the knights. And he spent his days trying to come back from that. And it's just heartbreaking to me. Epic poetry. I love epic poetry. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I liked Beowulf when I read it many moons ago. I probably reread that one. But I like epic poetry. This one, the modern translation, doesn't rhyme so well in a lot of places because the language has changed. But I like that you have the original, so you can see the original rhyming structure. That's one of the things that lets poetry be passed down more intact than other forms of storytelling, is that it's easier to remember because it rhymes. Your brain makes the connection that it's like, what's the next word? Well, it has to rhyme with the last word of the last line. Oh, that's right, it's this. And so you're less likely to get the story's less likely to change over the years. It might be expanded on, it might be embellished, but the core of it will kind of remain there because you can tell when it's been removed. And I love this one. I read it every couple years. I pull it off the shelf and I read it because it's my favorite. It's one of my favorite birthday gifts that I've gotten, and it just makes my heart feel full. Sorry about that cat fight. And it makes my heart full, and it makes me think about my own dealings with the world, and I try to be true and honorable in the things that I do. And I think I'm better for having read this story. Are there any myths and legends that stick with you that shape who you are today? I'd love to hear. Are you a fan of the Arthurian legends? I'm absolutely a fan of them. I'd love to hear your thoughts, opinions. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrated this winter. Happy everything to everyone and merry always. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.